Hi, I'm Kelly Blackledge with Tamarack National Wildlife Refuge. And today I want to share with you a little bit about backyard bird feeding. I love watching birds, and I bet you do too. It's become a really popular activity. And, seeing wildlife in general is such a great experience. And you don't always have to go to a park or a wildlife refuge or somewhere special and wild to see wildlife. Sometimes it comes to you, and I can help you with that with a backyard bird feeder. So let me share with you a few tips on backyard bird feeding. It is a pretty popular activity. A lot of people are watching birds, and we've been feeding birds in our backyards for hundreds of years, actually. Sometimes just with natural foods and plantings and things like that. But you can also bring birds into your backyard using feeders. One of the best things I like about backyard bird feeding is being able to share that with young people in your life or friends and family. It is so cool to watch birds with others and share some of those neat experiences with people around you. Now, of course, our birds are pretty good at finding their own food. We don't have to feed birds for them to survive. Birds are great at finding seeds, even through the winter months. Most of the birds that stick around for the winter are eating seeds. Obviously, the insect eaters migrate. So those that like to eat insects either change the type of food that they're going to eat through the winter, or they migrate and go to a place where insects are still available. Now, they're also really good at keeping warm. So again, we don't have to provide all of the food and stuff that they need to be able to survive the winter. Birds are really great at kind of bulking up, and they have adaptations to keep themselves warm. You can see this black-capped chickadee is all puffed up, creating air spaces in between those feathers to create a great insulation around him to be able to withstand super cold temperatures. There's all kinds of different feeders, and a lot of those feeders you often see as tube feeders, and that's what these are here. Most of the tube feeders are going to hold sunflower seeds or thistle seed or sunflower chips, those kind of things. And tube feeders are great. In fact, they will sometimes deter some of the birds that you might not want around so much by using tube feeders. They're also really easy to maintain. They stay clean, and it's easy for birds to access the food. Tube feeders are great. I love using tube feeders, especially for peanuts, which is one of my favorite to feed are peanut parts, to have a kind of cage-like bird feeder and use peanut parts in those bird feeders. It'll attract a lot of different kinds of birds, and it's great fat content for the winter. So you'll see a lot of birds with that. But there's also great ones for finches, and pretty much all of your thistle food will fit in a tube feeder. The finches love going to tube feeders, and that'll be like goldfinches and some of your purple finches and pine siskins and things like that love to go to those tube feeders. And then, of course, there are some for sunflower seeds as well. And black oil sunflower seeds are a good bet for a variety of birds. If you can only do one feeder, then I would do a black oil sunflower feeder, whether it be a tube feeder or a different shape of feeder. So here's some of those pine siskins and American goldfinches that will come to that thistle feeder. You can see the seeds are really tiny. The pine siskins are the ones with the stripy bellies, and the goldfinches aren't quite as gold in the wintertime. They're a little bit more dull, but they still have some yellow on them and those distinctive white bars on their wings. You'll also find in the winter red poles, and they usually have the little red dot on their head, or at least the males do, and their bellies aren't quite as stripy. So red poles with that yellow beak you might see at your thistle feeder in the winter. Now, hopper feeders, they hold a lot of seed, so they're pretty good to have around as well. And some of them will have suet feeders attached, like this one here. Hopper feeders are great also for a variety of birds. All your chickadees and other birds will come to that. The cardinal, as you see here, those red birds, really like a hopper feeder. They like to be kind of off the ground, but have really easy perching access compared to a tube feeder. You don't often see them come to tube feeders as much as a hopper feeder or ground feeder or fly-through feeder. And I like the hopper feeder because it holds so much. You don't have to fill it as often as some of the smaller tube feeders. So hopper feeders are great for, again, a variety of birds. And usually I'll put black oil sunflower seeds in a hopper feeder like this. Now there's also a fly-through feeder. Again, a variety of birds, anything will pretty much come to a fly-through feeder, except for the birds that like to feed on the ground. And this also protects that seed from the weather when you have a roof over the top. So you can put a variety of seed on there. Again, usually black oil sunflower seed is great to put on a fly-through feeder like this. And it's great viewing too. Sometimes at a hopper feeder, you might not be able to see the birds on the back side of the feeder, but at a fly-through feeder, you can see everything. Do you know all the birds in this one? So here we have a cardinal back there. We have looks like a chipping sparrow coming up. The goldfinch is there. There's a junco in the back, and then a northern flicker actually on this one too in the front. Using suet is great. Also really high fat content. You know, like peanuts, the suet feeders are really good for providing high fat content. And if a bird wants to get a lot of calories, whether it's getting ready to migrate or to survive the winter, it's going to want to go straight for something with really good high fat content. And whether it's a processed suet cake or the suet that you might, beef suet that you might get from a local butcher or grocery store, really great. So we have a Downy woodpecker here, and then also the Pileated woodpecker, which is huge. And the Pileated woodpeckers are so big that they really do need a big feeder to perch on. This particular one has a long stem underneath it so that that Pileated can use its tail to balance. It likes to be able to balance. It's not as good at perching on small surfaces. It kind of needs a nice tree trunk like surface to be able to perch and get to that suet. So you will see a lot of woodpeckers through the winter months, and probably a couple of our most common are the downy and hairy, which can look very much the same. They both have the black backs with the white spots or barring, white bellies, dark beak, striped head. The males will have a red spot on the back of their heads. Really, the only difference that you might notice is the size. So here they are compared. And if you only see one at a time, you want to look for the size of their beak. So the downy woodpecker has a pretty small beak. It's even smaller than half the size of its head. So if you compare the width of the head to the length of the beak of the downy woodpecker is only going to be about half the size. And on a hairy woodpecker, it's almost the full size of the width of his head. So that beak is a lot bigger and longer on the hairy woodpecker. And of course, it's a bigger bird. Another one you might see quite often through the winter is the red-bellied woodpecker. And you're probably thinking, but Kelly, that doesn't even have a red belly. But it does have a little red spot on the belly of this bird. But primarily it'll have the red stripe on the back of his head, white belly, and then speckly back. But the red-bellied woodpecker is a pretty common one. This one is on that peanut feeder. Actually, there's some sunflower seeds in this one too, so he likes both of those. But red-bellied woodpeckers are pretty common birds to see. So you'll see that this red-bellied woodpecker is about the size of a hairy woodpecker. It's a pretty big woodpecker as well. White-breasted nuthatch and red-breasted nuthatch. Both of these love to be to eat on a variety of feeders, the hopper feeder, the tube feeders, the fly-through feeders. They really like suet and peanut parts. So the white-breasted nuthatch, it might be, some people call him the upside down bird, or the one that walks upside down, face down to get its food. So this one is kind of a bluish gray back and a white belly and that black stripe on his head. The red-breasted nuthatch is a little bit smaller and usually has that rusty or reddish colored belly to it. The red-breasted nuthatch I love. They might even be my favorite bird. Not that I have a favorite, but if I did, it might be the red-breasted nuthatch because it's such a sweet little bird. It's just a little bit smaller. And oftentimes they will see more of them in the winter time. They are here year-round, but more often we'll see them in the winter time. And they're also seem to be a little bit more tolerant of people. So whereas a white-breasted nuthatch will quickly fly away from the feeder if you walk close, the red-breasted nuthatch might stick around and hang on to continuing to feed even though you walk up close to the bird feeder. Well, ground platforms are pretty great to have. These will also attract a lot of your finches. So when we see the pine siskins and redpolls and your dark-eyed juncos coming around, they're all going to be feeding kind of on the ground, and having that available is great. Just know that you're probably going to have to share that feed with the squirrels as well. So ground feeders throughout the year, the mourning doves will feed on these. You'll see blue jays coming down to the platform feeder. All kinds of birds will enjoy that. They're pretty easy to maintain as well. Again, you just have to make sure that you know you might be sharing them with some other wildlife as well. And something as big as a deer can pretty much empty that feeder in just a few minutes. So if you don't want to feed other wildlife, then you might not want a ground feeder like that. Even in the warmer days, again, you might see raccoons at your feeder, and during the season, you might get bears at your feeders, whether it's a ground feeder or even one that's up a little taller. And of course, there's the squirrel issue with all feeders. They are pretty smart. You can try everything and they usually seem to figure it out. I usually use a baffle to try to control the squirrels, or hang it in a place with cable, a long ways from the tree that they can't get out, something like this to try to deter them. Or certainly if you have a ground feeder, they're going to go there first where it's easy access and not worry about the ones that are hard to get to. So squirrels, always an issue when you have bird feeders. Another thing you want to consider is providing water. And it can be as simple as an old dog dish that's heated, getting that out there to where there's a place they can perch and get at the water. Birds do need to consume water through the winter months, and sometimes that can be a little hard to come by. So you might attract birds by just adding water to your bird feeder station. Now I just want to share a few birds to look out for that are kind of rare in our neck of the woods that would be worth reporting for sure. And one of those is the varied thrush. If you see this bird at your bird feeder, be sure and report it. And you can report it to your local, you can certainly call Tamarack, you can call the Minnesota Ornithologists Union and report that sighting. So the varied thrush has a lot of orange on it. We pretty much only see it in the winter months, but a pretty spectacular bird to see at your feeder. This is a neat rarity to have. Evening grosbeaks. We might see a lot of these this year. Evening grosbeaks come, again, generally speaking, through the winter months. in the late fall, early spring, those kind of time frames. And so you might see that and you'll think, oh my goodness, what a ginormous goldfinch. If something, a bird makes you say that, it's probably the evening grosbeak with all the yellow and black on this one. But take a look at that beak. It's got a big beak, kind of like a cardinal has, or some of our other grosbeaks. Pine grosbeak is another one. Pine grosbeaks are a little bit more reddish in color, obviously. Or if you see one that says, wow, that's the biggest purple finch I've ever seen, it's probably a pine grosbeak. Again, check out the really thick beak on that bird. Also really cool to see, which may come around your feeders or more likely around shrubs that still have berries on them in your yard, and that's the cedar waxwing. But we also get the Bohemian waxwing. So just look at the belly color of that bird. The Bohemian waxwing is a lot more grayish in color, whereas the cedar waxwing has that cedar colored head and a little bit more yellowish on the belly and more of a brown back as well. So if it's got a lot of gray on it, it's probably that Bohemian waxwing. But we do see these through the winter months as well. Now, bird feeding can be really fun, especially if you have kids around. You can do some pretty cool things when it comes to bird feeding, like creating these pine cone bird feeders. If you don't have pine cones handy, you can use bagels that are stale. You can, and other things like that. But peanut butter is great for bird feeding. Whether you're putting it on a log and just smearing it around where you want to attract some birds to a tree or a branch, you can just go out there with a spoon and spread it right onto the log, and you'll see birds come to that area because of the peanut butter. Like peanut parts, they love peanut butter as well, and that's a safe food to feed them. So these pine cone feeders, we spread peanut butter on them and then roll them in bird seed and hang them in the tree. Again, sharing the birding experience, whether it's from your kitchen table out the window or out on a trail, is pretty cool. Be sure and share your experiences with others. This is just such a great, fun thing to do. Again, whether it's in your house looking out the window or you go on a hike. You can also do some pretty cool things with birding when it comes to recording it. So becoming part of science by documenting what you're seeing in your backyard. There are a few programs that are that we're looking for people to help document what kind of birds they're seeing. And one of those is the Christmas bird count. Obviously, around Christmas time, you can go on to the Audubon website, and you can see where all the Christmas bird counts are and see about participating in one of those. And usually that means traveling to a site to participate in an established Christmas bird count at a park or natural area around you. You can also participate in the Great Backyard Bird Count. That always happens mid-February, so watch for that. Just go to birdcount.org and you'll find information about participating in the Backyard Bird Count. And there is a process to counting birds in your backyard. So you'll want to read through the directions on how to count so you're not double counting birds. Another one is Project Feeder Watch. So you can just go to feederwatch.org and you'll find some information about how to document birds that are coming to your bird feeder and upload that data. It's very helpful for scientists to know where our birds are and how they're moving through the winter months. So if you're going to have a backyard bird feeder, be a citizen scientist and help us with bird feeding counting. You can also do eBird, and that can be used anytime when you have special birds, especially for rarities like that I showed you there. You can document the birds that you're seeing through eBird, ebird.org, I think or just Google eBird and you'll find the eBird application there. Be sure and have a good bird book with you so you can identify the birds that you're seeing. Sometimes they can be a little confusing. Or if you rather use an app, you can download the Merlin birding app to your phone, no matter what kind of phone you have. It's a free app, and that is a great one. And you'll also learn some of the bird calls if you download the Merlin bird app. So whether you're making a little feeder for your tree outside, or you want to do a bird feeder out in the yard with that black oil sunflower seed, peanut parts, thistle seed, there's a variety of bird seed that you can use to attract birds to your window. Enjoy watching birds all year round. We'll see you again.